So I'm responsible for designing a practical course on the Global Change Biology module, which is a module for second year undergraduate students at Queen Mary University of London. And because global change biology and climate change is sort of obviously a worldwide thing and a very research-oriented topic, I thought it would be nice during the practicals to develop something that would be experimentally based or original research. And at that point I was directed towards the thinking writing team in Queen Mary, who made me aware of the opportunity to carry out a research-based learning and writing initiative, which they thought would be very applicable to our course. And they directed me towards a paper which was instrumental in forming a lot of the ideas for the practical series by Han-Suk Chan in the journal Teaching in Higher Education. So the key message that I took from this paper is the principle that he lays out called the direct-to-community model. And this is very much based around the idea of learning as doing, rather than students just sitting there and being lectured to about ideas that have been formulated in the past by other people and that they're detached from. So rather than that, they can be involved in perhaps original research and being part of conceptualizing new ideas and having more ownership over the entire process. And I was also very interested in an idea within the paper that rather than just having a course for this 1 year based around these ideas, that it could carry on from year to year and build with each subsequent year, so that one cohort of students publishes, if you like, their findings from their experimental process in the form of reports that from the basis of secondary literature that will go on to be read and used by future students down the line, so that in the next year the new cohort of students can realise, well, this is something that my peers have carried out and something that was achievable for them, and it ends up breaking down a lot of the perceived barriers between these experts in the fields that are the only people that they see as being able to publish new and original findings, and even if they're not published in primary literature, even as secondary literature, it makes it seem more accessible and something that they can achieve. So initially, when I was formulating my ideas for how to design the practical series, I was thinking in the first practical that we could just launch straight into setting up the experiment, so providing the students with an experimental design, because in ecology there's a lot of practicalities obviously that go into carrying out an experiment. I mean, we had to collect animals, we had to source tanks to be able to set the experiment up in the laboratory, and this all takes time, so it's not something you can just sort of launch into. You need to prepare it a couple of months in advance. But after talking to the thinking writing team and reading this Chang paper as well, I really realised the value of involving the students in the thought process of designing the experiment, and not just designing it, but right from the very beginning, like making an observation from the literature, identifying a sort of a gap in the research, if you like, something that hasn't been tested before in a systematic way, so that then, rather than just being handed an experimental design, that they actually see the importance of the question that we're testing. And that's a really key thing in science, is having a clear question and coming up with a testable hypothesis in very clear wording, and that, I think, was a very important part of the practical series. And to achieve that, in the very first practical, I got the students to do a literature review. So I gave them a topic in terms of global change, looking at the effects of environmental warming. And because something that's very easy to measure in the lab is decomposition rate of organisms, we thought we would try to see from the literature what effect temperature might have on decomposition rate. So the students were divided into groups of 3, and they were told each student in the group had to focus on just one ecosystem type, whether it be marine, freshwater, terrestrial, and find one paper that showed an effect of temperature on decomposition rate. There was no prerequisite, it didn't have to be directional, they just had to find a paper that showed an effect. And they had to upload that to a website for the module, and in just one simple line sum up the key finding of the paper. So, for example, increasing temperature leads to an increase in decomposition rate in a marine system. And they were given an hour to carry out their literature review. And at the end of that time, we did a little meta-analysis on their findings. So looking through these one-line statements and seeing if we could find a pattern. And the vast majority of studies showed that increasing temperature led to an increase in decomposition rate. And it didn't seem to matter if it was in a marine, a freshwater, or a terrestrial system, the same result was found. So straight away we had an observation that the students made themselves, and straight away they could see, yes, this is something that's been shown, but has not been tested systematically. So no person before had taken similar organisms from each of those environments and looked at them, manipulating them at the same time, so manipulating key factors, temperature, and ecosystem type. And this became the model for our experiment, and we created a testable hypothesis off that. So informally, the feedback that I've got from the students so far is quite interesting. So during the setting up the experiment and the second practical, a few of them were sort of coming up to me and going, and this really isn't something that's just been rehashed from another year. And I was like, no, you mean you come up with an original observation, and the experiment we've designed has not been carried out before. And they're like, and is that the kind of thing that is publishable? And I said, why not? And this really seemed to surprise them or maybe spark something in their eyes. And I think it really sort of breaks down that barrier, that perceived barrier between, publishing or original research being sort of the right of more senior scientists. And they realize that as long as you make an interesting observation, come up with a clear question and a testable hypothesis, logically and carefully design an experiment to test that hypothesis and analyze the results in the right way, that's exactly the kind of thing that can be published, and it's something that's very achievable even if you are just a student and a sort of up-and-coming scientist in the world.